Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled Unlocking Productivity with Digital Transformation. My name is Juanita Mugo, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Element. I'm very excited to introduce today's speakers, but before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This session will run for 1 hour with about 40 to 45 minutes of presentation time and 15 minutes for questions. Please type your question at any point during the session, and we will address it during the Q&A portion. We're also recording the session, and we'll share this information with you after today. If you know someone who can benefit, please share the recording, and thank you. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers, starting with our guests. We are so excited to have Jane Arnold, SVP at Covestro, join us today. Jane is the head of Global Process Control Technology and the first woman in the Office of the CTO in senior management. She's a member of Covestro's digital governance body, overseeing all digitization efforts in the manufacture of products at over 30 sites around the world. Her goal is to use digitization to give ops and maintenance teams the right information at the right time, leading to an AI-based cognitive digital plant. Jane has a degree in mathematics from the University of Houston and is very passionate about developing others, especially women in STEM. Andy is the CEO of Element and oversees the vision and growth of our company. He has held executive roles at enterprise software companies, from VC-backed startups to private equity-backed growth plays, to business units of large cap publicly traded companies. These companies serve the needs of asset-intensive industries, adopting digital solutions for cleaner, safer, healthier, and more profitable operation systems and analytical applications in industries including power generation, T&D, oil and gas, chemicals, mining, and manufacturing. Welcome to you both, and now I'll turn it over to Andy.
Juanita, thank you, and welcome everybody today. Jane, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Terrific, and looking forward to a great discussion today. We're going to talk about the people equation and unlocking productivity with digital transformation. And there's always this tendency to talk about people, process, and technology that has to be orchestrated together for success in digital transformation. But then the focus always tends to be way too much on the technology and not about the people and the business problems. And so I'm looking forward to this discussion today, and we're going to get into ideas around people and productivity. And what I will make this a discussion as much as just a typical webinar, presentation. And I'm looking forward to this, Jane. And sort of kicking it off, there's this paradox that's arisen during certainly the last decade in the U.S. specifically, is shown in these charts, and which generally holds true globally, where productivities remain flat for manufacturers despite ramping investments in software. So you see the dramatic increase in software spend versus property, plant, and equipment. It's not to say that efficiency and throughput aren't improving, but that productivity is flat. And this was a slide that I borrowed from Andrew Obin from Bank of America. He, as you'll recall, Jane, you and I were at the ARC convention. Boy, it seems like years ago, but it was just earlier this year in February in Orlando. But how does this resonate for you? This paradox?
It really does resonate with me, and I remember watching that presentation and thinking, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the way I see it is that the companies are starting to try out this new software in manufacturing, and they're seeing the value in it, so they're getting really excited and buying more and more, waiting for that payback. And what I've seen happen is that it doesn't get fully implemented all the way down to the end user in a sustainable way. So maybe it's not fully utilized and it's not getting the value. And that's kind of where I see the problem is that we you know, we try something out, we check the box and say, yeah, it's good, and we're going to have all this payback, but don't take the proper time and engagement to get it all the way through the entire organization. I think that we can improve on that.
I think that's right. And naturally, you know, the productivity, the flat productivity, some of it's a skills gap, and there are a variety of realities around that. But certainly, you know, technology and the adoption of technology, you know, must play and does play a role in how this all, you know, comes together in a way that helps, you know, owner operators of industrial assets to ramp their productivity. And so there's this counterintuitive idea that automation is actually a job creator. And, you know, I turn to, you know, there are different examples you can use, but certainly robotics is one of them. And I know there's not necessarily a lot of robotics in the chemical sector, but this one certainly resonates for me, where you look at the chart on the left, which is a study of nearly 2,000 manufacturing companies and that are headquartered in Spain. And it shows that, you know, over time, those companies that adopted robotic automation actually grew employment by 50% over that time period, whereas, you know, the non-adopters of robotic technology and of more and more automation, their employment actually decreased. And so there's this idea, and certainly the Elon Musk, the famous, you know, quote about humans are underrated, where they put too much computer vision and too much automation into the Model 3 assembly line, and they realized they needed to deconstruct it a bit and get that human element in there to improve their productivity. So I wonder what sort of thoughts you have about automation and this whole notion of that automation is going to kill jobs versus create jobs.
So I've been doing some aspect of automation for most of my 30-year career, and I have not actually seen that at all. So we view digitalization, at least at Covestro in the chemical space, as a way to augment the worker, to give them more information so that they're better prepared and don't have to spend so much time looking things up or making decisions, that it's all available. And when you think about, even with robotics, you have to have people design the solution, maintain the solution, and actually use it. You need that, you know, strong technical expert, subject matter expert, be it the operator or maintenance person, who's engaged and involved. And really, my opinion is that the people with their hands closest to the process know more than anyone, and you cannot afford to lose those people. And so the solution is really to upskill, as you mentioned earlier, to make sure that as you're changing out routine type of work with some sort of automation, that these employees are better prepared for the next layer and the next level of improvements.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's to your point, and starting to move into digital transformation more broadly for industrials, it's really another wave of automation. And we hear about, well, industrials, they're sort of slow to adopt the cloud, and you know, you hear this laggard argument, but the reality is it's non-industrial sectors that are really the ones who are now just beginning to adopt automation. And automation, you know, means a lot of different things, but in many non-industrial sectors, it's about, you know, automating process, obviously.
Right.
I mean, when we think about digital transformation, it's you break it down, the two biggest pieces are automation, but then there's digitization, and automation is really, again, about executing the process and optimizing for, you know, optimal decisions, operational decisions. But the digitization piece that's really beginning to happen in earnest is really moving from more of those manual processes, paper, et cetera, whether it's, you know, digitizing operator rounds, P&ID diagrams, whatever. It's making things more accessible to more people in the plant and in the enterprise.
Yeah, I agree. When I first took this position, I guess it's 3 or 4 years ago, and the board at Covestro was announcing that they're going fully digital. And I really had trouble at first with that concept, because In my experience, we've been digital. You know, we've had transmitters writing to the DCS and doing control and automation for decades. And what I realized was that in the automation space of these units, you're only using about 1% of the data. And we have just this mass of data that we need to do something with and make improvements. And that's where it's really taking it to the next level, which is this fourth industrial revolution of digitalization. And that's taking all of this data and putting it together and getting actionable insights from it. And the improvements that we've made over the past 3 years really are showing, you know, what we've missed before by not making use of all of this data.
That's exactly right. And really, it's this next wave of automation is about better operational decisions, which does require more and better data to produce that additional information. But it's really pointed at the person and the idea that, you know, everybody to a degree, or even in full, really becomes an operations analyst and needs the tools and data. And it ultimately, you know, that next wave of automation, it also is going to restructure work. Not only, you know, new types of jobs will be created, but, you know, current jobs, they'll see their workload shift more towards what's represented in this chart. And Deloitte published some really, you know, great thought-provoking personas, both for existing jobs and then, you know, new job types. But you can see on this, if you look at the time shift spent on activities and how it changes in 5 years as, you know, a company, and in this case, it's a factory manager who's now a smart factory manager, and you see the fundamental shift from, you know, spending 30% of their time on reporting administrative tasks, which is, you know, a lot of that is chasing data, et cetera, and very inefficient and harms productivity, or spending, you know, more time on things like, you know, resource planning, et cetera. Automation is about really freeing these people up to spend more time on process optimization, analysis, and innovation, you know, things like that. And so when we think of automation and improving productivity and what's going to happen with people and their jobs, does this resonate for you, Jane, this shift?
It really does. And that's, you know, throughout my career, as we would solve one problem, you know, take away the most annoying nuisance that happens for the operator or for the maintenance person, then it suddenly the next layer of problems becomes visible. So it's always this continuous cycle of improvement. And you get to the point where things are fully automated and we actually have, you know, good use of that data, and the whole landscape changes. The jobs of the people automatically just evolve over time, and they can make better decisions with supply chain and production planning and things like that. It's more intuitive for them, and we've actually make their lives easier. We still need them there. I always am going to say that, you know, especially for safety purposes and whatever, to have enough in the plant in case there's an actual problem. But I'm really seeing that the nature of work is definitely changing in the plants.
And we see those must-have skills shifting.
Yes.
You know, in our business, we work with you know, customers like you and Covestro, and there are, you know, job titles, you know, the skills, and they are fundamentally shifting. And so one of the personas that we do a lot of work with is data engineers. And, you know, 5 years ago, data engineering, you know, it was not really that prominent a role. Today, it lands on all the, you know, top 10 jobs of the future lists on Glassdoor, LinkedIn, or whatever. How have you seen that at Covestro in terms of roles like data engineers or others have started to emerge and become more in demand and more prominent?
And that's exactly what I'm seeing. And so we have in production, in manufacturing, we've converted some of our advanced process control experts into our data scientists for production and technology. But also within digital R&D, some of these really qualified chemists who have a passion for data science. They're now doing quantum computing on our, developing new materials. And it's really, really exciting. But in addition, at Covestro, we have a data agnostic group called Advanced Analytics under Innovation, where they're adding this extra element to every part of our business, and to make sure that we utilize it. So it's fundamentally changing. When we hire people, the way we look at the people that we bring in as far as the skill set. And if they don't have it, but we think they're a good fit anyway, we will provide that training and that's needed to be successful. Because you can't do anything now without data, without computers and software and all that work.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, that's a great lead into really the next section. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jane, and let's dig into a little bit more about what you're doing at Covestro, and the role of people in your views on a sustainable digital transformation.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So first, just one comment about Covestro. We are a world-leading chemical manufacturer of high-tech materials. And if you look around your home, your office, your car, I know not many people are going to the office these days, but you're going to see our products in just about everything. So polyurethanes, the cushions of your seats, polycarbonates, coatings, and adhesives. It's common materials for consumers to make products with. So next, please. So the part of the reason that I'm interested in the human element, early when I was a child, really, I was interested in psychology and psychiatry, and that interest has stayed with me, even though I developed this passion for manufacturing. And so I have learned how to incorporate both. And I spent years and years in the control room with the operators learning, okay, what's your problem and how can I solve it? And each person, each perspective has a different need or a different idea, and you have to consider all of that. And so I've learned that really by properly engaging the workforce, you can get so much more accomplished that is long-term and sustainable. So just kind of some general things that I've learned throughout my career, I put down here to go through. So when we look at having a sustainable approach, in my opinion is that you need to know what problem you're going to solve. You can't just introduce a technology and hope that it automatically is adopted and people do it. That's fun for a lot of technical people to work on technology just for the sake of technology, but you end up spending a lot of time and money that's maybe not useful for the company. So when you look at the problem to solve, what value will you have? And if that value is only, and I say that lightly, only to make the operator's life better, it's absolutely the right thing to do. And then anything from there, any improvement above making the operator's life better is just a bonus. And when we look at co-ownership, so what I mean about that is truly engaging the workforce and incorporating their thoughts and ideas and pain points into whatever you're developing. And this is more than change management. What I've seen throughout my career is that each company has some sort of change management program, and they'll have a new initiative and they show it to everybody and communicate and roll it out. But if they're not really following it all the way through to every single end user and getting that feedback, then the end user will ignore it if it can. So what we've adopted at Covestro is how to really engage that end user. Spend that time asking questions and listening. What we did with our ProDavis platform that I'll show you an example later is we had early adopters and got their feedback and actually incorporated that feedback. And now they're like, where's mine? And they want it. They're co-owners and they're asking for it and they want it. And so some of the things that we've done to try to gain this acceptance is by starting with something that's familiar. So at Covestro, with all of our time series data, we use OSI Soft Pi and have for a number of years. So all all users, operations, maintenance, engineering, they all are familiar with Pi. So we decided that we should build our platform with Pi look and feel and base so that it's easy to see it. And so when you are modifying something that they're already used to, it's easier for them to accept the change. And so we looked at all of our source of truth systems and said, well, what data do we need out of here? And based on some of this feedback from our early adopters, we've incorporated it into our platform to make sure that we've got the people have what they need and it looks and feels like something similar. And then, of course, incorporating their feedback in the solution. The next slide, please. So, back early in my career, I mentioned that I sat in the control room for years with the operators. And of course, that's not possible anymore. It's not one person and one solution anymore. It's, we've got over 30 sites globally. We've got all this rollout that's going on. How do we really get that engagement? So what we decided to do, really kind of started by chance, but it looks like it's working, is having what we're calling digital champions at each site. And this digital champion needs to be someone that the people know and trust, maybe who's a longtime employee, who hopefully would have a passion for the topic and be able to be that interface. So we currently only have 3 right now. We've got one in Baytown, one that represents our sites in Spain, and one that represents our production site in China, in Shanghai. And but it's going really well because they're bringing in that input. They're in there talking to the end users and, of course, the native language and bridging that gap for us. And so that really helps. And this digital champion is helping with coordination and getting volunteers in the project. So deployment is actually speeding up. And you really need this engagement. So the top down, which is where I'm at these days, we want to enable the workforce. We want the clear focus, and in which our goal is to reduce unplanned outages. But also we need to provide the resources to the people doing the work to make sure they can get the job done. Having it all happen in the background is not successful or sustainable long term. But those people that are closest to the process, as I mentioned before, they really know more than anybody else, and we have to properly engage them and get their input. Because that knowledge transfer, they take what they have done for years and years, and we start putting that into the software, and you're really going to get that sustainable solution. And as we talked about earlier, training and reskilling is really very important. Humans are always going to be part of the equation, and we want to make sure that our people are always successful. So as we start to change the jobs, we'll train them and give them the tools that they need in order to be successful. Next slide, Andy. So just to give you an idea of what we're doing and what that looks like. So this is actually Pi Vision. It's an upgrade from Pi Process Book for anyone who's used it. And we created our own dashboards. This is one view going in. You can also do a geographical view. And you can select whatever item it is that you want to go into and look at depending on your job function. So next slide, please. So just this to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. This does seem like a lot of information on the screen, but many of you probably noticed the purple line that's trending down, and you wonder what that is. And then you see the regular trends that we have here. So if you go to the next slide, please, Andy. So I want to describe what we're doing and how we're actually incorporating all of this and considering all of the different feedback from different people. And if we start at the bottom left, this is what the process book screens would normally look like in the past, and we can easily grab those and pull them in here. So this is just about a heat exchanger, a very common piece of equipment in the process industry. And so we've got this look and feel basically on all of our assets that provides the same or very similar information. So if you go up one, and the KPIs there. So these are the calculated key performance indicators, and in this case, for the heat exchanger, it's about the heat transfer coefficient. And that purple line trending down is telling you that your heat exchanger is starting to foul and you're not getting the appropriate heat transfer. And as you look around the screen, so the top right, we had process experts question whether or not our calculations were correct. So we made information from the Asset Framework Library, the AF library, available on the screen. So anybody actually reviewing this could at a glance see, well, is it actually correct based on the information that I have? And if we look at the bottom right, this is our maintenance history on this piece of equipment. So if you imagine a maintenance planner is getting ready for the next shutdown and needs to see, well, how many heat exchangers do I need to clean during this outage? You know, he can look through this pretty quickly and see, do we have the right heat transfer? And if not, when was the last time it was cleaned? And he can confirm all of his information, and it's all linked together live. So you'll notice here there's actually quite a few other things. So we have a link into our PNID. So this is the current PNID for this particular area in the field that has this heat exchanger. We have a link into our self-service analytics platform. And at the top, you can see a link to the equipment specs and different sources of information. You can call up the old process book if you don't want to look at this. And it's all this information together. We're also experimenting with some AI that's looking at the transmitter data themselves, and we're about to start a live or online pilot with that. And if that's successful, then these transmitters that we're looking at here will have the health information available on the bottom right with the maintenance, so that we know, is it a transmitter issue or is it a heat exchanger issue? And then the way Element fits into this picture is we're working with them in 2021 to have all this information evergreen. You know, my dream for 30 years is that if you print off a drawing, it's actually correct when you walk out in the field. And so this is a way that we're going to try to make sure that all the information going to the end user is up to date, as up to date as we can get it.
And Jane, so what we're seeing here is on one screen, which is what you described as something that's familiar to users in the plants, so they don't have to learn something new. It's you know, PyVision, and you're orchestrating data in here, obviously from the Pi system, but it looks like, you know, you've got SAP data in here, and then you've got links out to other data sources, so you're able to bring multiple sources of data together. And then I think you described the maintenance and the process teams are now sharing this data and this view, and I suspect there are other teams as well.
Yes, and also, you know, what we'd like to get to the point once our deployment is far enough that if the operator is seeing a particular problem in the unit, but maybe he doesn't trust the data, he doesn't trust what the transmitter's telling him, maybe he could look on his PyVision screen, call up that equipment, and see, is there an anomaly detected? Is the transmitter really a problem, or is there actually a problem in the process? And this is what we're really hoping to bridge. And when I talk about cognitive digital plant, all that feedback goes into making this better. And eventually we'll have all that AI and machine learning working and making really significant improvements to operations.
And if I want to do some analysis in some other system, this is connected, and I can use different tools but the same data to explore problems in a different way?
That's correct. Yes. So actually that Seek link down there, if you click on it, that's our self-service analytics. All the tags that you see listed in that process variables is automatically copied into that when it comes over. So we've got it all set up automatically. And the same with the PNIDs into our engineering technology system. And so it's all linked together. Now you still need the humans to put it in the first place, and we're working on improving all of that. You know, long gone, someday will be the days when you have to go into the reliability engineer's office and asks for the spec information. He opens a drawer and pulls out paper. So we're hoping that eventually it's all digitalized and it's all easily accessible, and you can quickly switch between the different systems if you need to dive in deeper and it's not available.
And Jane, the way that we have for decades seen this happen is it's often happened organically at the plant, and a screen is built. The engineers, the others, at the plant site are bringing some data together. The way that Covestro is approaching this, can you talk a little bit about that and how you plan to drive more federation of views and best practices and data models and really enable across plant sites, across the whole fleet, and share best practices and get leverage and productivity that way?
So one advantage that Covestro has is that we're highly standardized, and so that does make it a lot easier. We have central technology centers, and I'm referring to process technology, and these process experts can actually compare the same product at different locations around the world. And we actually have screens set up in the same ProDavis platform that allows that comparison between units. And but everything that we're working on, so we actually have a whole different work stream on the engineering technology and digitalizing all of our drawings and things like that. We're all committed to, at one day, it'll all be tied together, so it is continuous. And we're starting this global rollout and making all of this available, and people are really excited and volunteering to be part of it. And so it's been highly successful so far, but we're really still at the beginning of the journey.
Great. That was fantastic, giving people access to ready data and tools to solve problems, but doing it more collaboratively and getting people more on the same page. That's exciting. And I know it's early in the journey, but terrific progress thus far.
Yeah, it's really been fun, and every time we talk about this, I look back when I was in the early 90s or the mid to late 90s when I was supporting operations, and I really wish I had these tools. I think of all the great things that I could have accomplished had it been so easy and laid out for me like this is today.
That's great. It is amazing what is available today. It just is. It can make your head spin for sure. Well, let's shift and talk about the role of data then, more specifically in improving productivity. And we talked about the changes in the structure and type of work, and got a great overview of the work you're doing at Covestro and thoughts on how to bring this all together. And to one degree or another, people really to be those operational analysts, and as these jobs shift, you gotta have great analytical tools, as you said, and you have to have access to data. And so when we think about people-ready data, there are really some major elements that we want to see happen. The first one is it has to be self-service. Too often it's been sort of C-suite data lake projects. And we have to, it just has not been accessible to users in the plants or relevant, and so we have to see that shift more towards any data consumer has to be able to self-serve on the data, regardless of their application, their analytical tool, their use case, their role or function. That's absolutely critical. People-ready data also, it has to be immediate. They have to be able to access the data they need when they need it, and the real-time nature of production operations and operations in the plant, it's absolutely critical. And then you're not going to get adoption where you can't support those needs. It also has to be operational, building on that immediate point, where it has to serve the growing needs of the operational analysts and the engineers, operators in the plant. And we have to bring OT context to IT data and tools, and address specific needs and granular, these granular use cases. So we have to be able to operationalize the data, and then to your point, keep it evergreen so that it's always ready. It also has to be impactful. It has to have impact. And I love the way you described how bottoms up at the plant, in the control room, working with the folks who are closest to the process. And really, impact is about having access to data that is closest to that business outcome, so that they can have impact for the business. Right. And so that's hugely important. And then, of course, the data has to be trusted, which requires enterprise data management, governance. But you're going to not get the adoption that you want if the folks in the plant who know the data the best, if they don't trust it. And so Jane, how important is self-service and are some of these other factors in driving your digital transformation at Covestro?
So it's really quite important. And early in my career, I kind of ignored the whole IT aspect of all this, and I was only interested in firewall down to the field and taking care of that. But over these past few years, I've been working closely with Covestro's Chief Information Officer to see how can we do this better together. And we're working on a lot of IT/OT integration topics. And actually, one of the things that we're doing as we migrate to cloud is this whole self-service piece. IT is going to be hosting the infrastructure and taking care of everything and providing the tools that we need. But we actually have DevOps accounts that we install our software in and do all that, and it is self-service. And if you think about today in our environment today, and everyone's got a smartphone, and in a moment they can get all the information that they need. Well, this is what's being expected by the workforce. Why can't I have that information? Why does it take 2 days to get a firewall rule change? Why does it take me days of searching for a piece of paper to answer a question? And it all needs to be current and accessible and right now, and then they want to trust it. I mean, I think that's really a key. We're doing a lot of work on the part where we're trusting that data and that information so we can make the right decisions. Because if you present everything but the user doesn't trust it, they're just, well, that's not the answer, right, and ignore it. And so we work on all of that. And it's going really quite well, much better than I had anticipated. So once I made a slide on what is PCT, and it's because we cover everything that runs the plant from a technology standpoint, and presented it to the IT team, and the response was, oh, we have so much work to do in order to be able to support you. And we've really gotten a good cooperation working together now.
And it's certainly a challenge, the getting OT, IT data orchestrated together and ready for consumption. This study from Tech Clarity really resonated with me, and just that not only the role of plant data, but how challenging it can be to bring it together in a meaningful way, where it's available, where it's trusted. And this was a survey of over 300 manufacturers, but the lack of ready data really hampers the productivity, and we're really looking to ramp productivity. So the ability of people to easily perform their analysis and use the data without having to spend 60 to 80% of their time chasing that data is really important. And I won't go through all of these one by one, but there are certainly some that stick out. But in particular, getting that OT data, which is hard to work with, contextualized with IT data to give it meaning and to help drive analytics and decisions, is certainly one of the greater challenges today. And yes, I know that you've seen some of these very challenges in your work at Covestro, to be sure.
Yes, absolutely. And we work on all of them because, each time we make one step forward, we see all these other things that we have to fix. And every day and every week, we see added value by the work that we're doing, and it's really beneficial.
And really getting there, and you talked about your work with the CIO at Covestro and just some of the challenges. And I think what many people don't really appreciate is just this industrial stack that's now, just to get into the technology for a bit here and widen the aperture, but this, this industrial stack that owner operators are ultimately working to achieve, it's no easy thing to pull off. It's an order of magnitude harder than the enterprise stack. The enterprise stack is well known today. There's still a lot of innovation going on. There's still a lot of movement in the cloud and the way that we're able to manage greater and greater volumes of data, greater scale. But it's pretty well known. What's really beginning to emerge is this need, and you talked about AI, but to really fix that missing middle between IT and OT. And a lot of the IT organizations are out trying to deploy the AI ML, multimodal architecture, and trying to figure out how to pull in the OT, or IIoT services piece, and how you bring that together and make that available, not just from a systems perspective, but in particular the data, so that people can use these modern tools and you can have impact. That's a huge challenge. Can you talk a little bit about your viewpoints on how companies can get to the next level of architecture to make this easier on people?
That's actually a pretty difficult question. So what we're doing is we're actually kind of making the move all at once as we go into cloud. So the transferring the OT data into the IT space, like all the time series data to do analytics, is quite complicated, not from a technical standpoint, but like a data ownership and who owns the data and who gets to look at the data. And there's all kinds of problems that I had not considered before that they come up, because the plant managers are data owners, and then as you start to give access to our PI systems, we've got to make sure that the security, you can't write back to the DCS uninvited, so to speak, and allow hackers in. So from that technical part, it's all achievable, but it's also the politics behind it that's happening. But what we're doing at Covestro is we're actually transferring everything into cloud. And so we're working with our AWS partners, and we've prioritized a lot of the enterprise things that we have currently that's being hosted in a data center, and starting to move those over. But we're also doing some of the OT things. So our third-party software like Elements Unify is going to be in our AWS cloud, and we're going to be able to run it all from there. And that actually helps us to bridge that. We're still discussing the time series data piece, but soon that will be available in a safe and secure way for all of our analytics experts, the data scientists and data engineers to utilize that. And it does take a lot of negotiation and discussion. And those technical experts that have been maintaining these control systems for years, it's a change for them to suddenly have a line to the cloud, and what does that look like? So it's a lot of work, but we have managed to come up with a way to do that. And it seems to be working. Of course, we're at the beginning of the journey with that as well. So there's a lot of things going on in parallel, but that's how we're doing it. We're actually changing the data structure to our AWS cloud, and at the same time, we're figuring out what synergies do we want to improve in OT, and having that included in the cloud to be able to connect with our time series data and do that work.
Yeah, it really is that people factor, and it reminds me of that old Peter Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for lunch. We may have great strategy and around digital transformation, but if you can't work through the cultural issues, which you just articulated, of how OT and IT can work together and do it in a thorough and thoughtful way, you won't get there.
Yes. Yes, it takes a lot of time, and you know, part of that is everyone wants to be heard. They want to make sure that they're understood. And then once we have all the problems on the table, then only then can we figure out, okay, how do we solve the problem? And so it's been a little slow at first, but we're starting to accelerate that progress, and it's going really well.
And then just to sort of wrap up on a couple of things that are a little more, little narrower, but just in terms of, you know, adopting, you know, working, having innovation, working with startups like Element, you know, our product, which Element Unify, which is shown here, you know, we're really focused on being that you know, getting folks off of spreadsheets, helping them get more productive, but really enabling that open, more flexible layer or interface between sources of data and those who need to consume the data, you know, regardless of whether they're on-prem, whether it needs to happen in source systems, edge devices, or in the cloud. And hyper focused on the integration of OT and IT, the contextualization of the data to give particularly the time series data meaning. And then to the point that you described, that governance becomes so critical. Who has access to what data? What silos are proliferating? Because it's not just data silos and you know, more and more spreadsheets, more analytics across the fleet end up creating silos in themselves. So very much focused on that integrated piece of, you know, bringing the data together, but then giving it meaning and then keeping it evergreen and allowing it to be governed is where we really see the value that we can bring. And in doing so, you know, bringing more productivity, getting people off of spreadsheets and into automation. I wonder if you have any thoughts about working with, you know, because you at Covestro, you work with companies like Element, Seek, and others that are earlier stage, but how you think about co-innovation in digital transformation and some of the people factors in that.
So actually, we like the co-innovation, and we really like working with startups because we can do that. I've got some really talented people on my team, and they want to improve the product that they see, and we're able to do that, like with Element. And to say, you know, if we had this as well, then this would be even better. And that is really exciting to me. It's more difficult with the big companies, but of course we work with all sizes and all different complexities. But the co-innovation, I think, is really interesting. We've got a small team working together, and this can be just Covestro folks, not considering the startups or the vendors, but you have this diverse look at you know, the problem and the solution. It's where you come up with really the best answers.
Yeah, I love that, and we've just much appreciated the work we've been able to do with Covestro, because that collaboration and some of the things that you talked about earlier around bringing people together, you know, it's also extends beyond the four walls of Covestro.
Yes.
But then
it's more fun that way. So yeah,
that's for sure. But just sort of bringing it all the way back, it's got to be about the business and the business value. And this is a slide that I anonymized. It's from another customer, but it's the idea of, okay, we want to be on this journey, but I've got my day job. As I'm bringing in these new capabilities, you know, and I want to automate, that takes effort as well. And I need to understand what sort of lift I get from these new capabilities, like Element Unify. And this one is a company that's got, you know, over 400 plant sites globally, and they're trying to deploy, not unlike what you described in the screenshots you showed, but they're looking at just initially deploying pump and compressor OEE use cases and predictive maintenance use cases. And their challenge is, how do we get there fast, efficiently, and build it? And, you know, working with Element, they were able to dramatically shrink the time to analytics, the cost to analytics, and then the maintenance. So as we think about these journeys and companies that get stuck in pilot purgatory, do you have any advice on how to attach the adoption of some of these new capabilities to the business use cases, and how you're able to drive that through and into change at Covestro?
So what we did in the manufacturing of products is we looked at what problem do we want to solve, and we wanted to improve our OEE or our EBITDA or margin one, however you want to look at it. We wanted to make sure that we could stay online making products so we could sell it. And so we looked at the whole thing. Okay, how do we improve this? And we went this goal of 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is, of throughput that we lost because of unplanned outages, and we want to fix let's say half of it, whatever the numbers were. And so everything that we're doing over the past 3 years is all with that same goal in mind. So I don't have anyone who's nitpicking, well, what does this software do and what value does that bring? So which is really, I'm grateful for, because we can make progress a lot faster. But what I found at Covestro and probably other chemical company and in other industry is that the people who are trying the software want it to be perfect. And they will continue working with maybe different vendors and different things and trying a certain POC and waiting for it to be perfect before actually making a decision. And what we did, I was like, okay, do you like it? Well, let's put it live and let's try it and let's make it happen. And then when we start talking about, you know, what you're showing here, these numbers, I mean, I think that that's very achievable and more so. And what I'm looking forward to with Element and at Covestro is this evergreen piece. And I go back to the example of someday being able to print out a P&ID and have it be right in the field, and want to make sure that this platform that we're delivering, we have these links into these documents, and you know, if you change the impeller size on a motor, you want it to, or the pump, you want it to still, your model to still work. And so this evergreen aspect is going to help us actually keep all of this information current. And I think that's really crucial in the work that we're doing, which means that this estimated savings is uncalculatable, because you have all this, you know, work that you won't have to do, because it's always going to be current. You know, if you do a debottleneck on a plant and you put that information in our engineering technology system, and then there's some sort of alert or information that says, hey, your data model needs to be looked at, it might have changed, and you can actually, you know, do that at the time, then that trust continues to be built with the end user.
Yeah, that's a good point, because this really only captures the build side of stamping out like analytics at plants, and you know, the cost saving for every OEE analytic per plant. What it doesn't show is that value you just talked about, the maintenance that often happens because you get into data decay, and how we can help customers prevent that. But then also, this same company happens to be stamping out these use cases, but they're adopting one of the major IoT platforms, and the same data that is feeding these individual analytics gets pumped right into their IoT platform. So it's that repeatability, reusability that's so important. I know we've run a little bit longer on the discussion than we originally planned, but it's been terrific. And I think now it's time to open it up for some questions if we've got some.
Yes, we have some great questions, guys. So the first question is, what are the digital skills that modern process control engineers need? Programming, software engineering, data science?
So, you know, when we look at process control, I'm imagining the technical expert who works on the DCS and SIS systems, and when I learned the software, I learned it from the vendors. So Emerson, it was Fisher Provox at the time, and then evolved from there. But what we're seeing a lot of uses as we move from advanced process control or process control improvements to more digitalization. There's a big push for understanding Python, because that's a natural language software that can be used, and it's very versatile to do an awful lot with that. And then there's some basic machine learning or AI digitalization type of classes that you can take that actually can help understand the different things that you can do with the data. But that's where I would start, is something simple like Python, and then start seeing where does that lead to.
Okay, great. The next question is, how do all of these systems interact with R&D processes and data? How can R&D teams make their data useful for production teams to accelerate bringing new products to market?
So that's a great question, and we're actually doing that. So with our digital R&D, it's fascinating working with them because they work closely with the customer. And we've got, so I think it's called Digital Technical Services, where we provide support to the customer. And what we're focused on is, how is the customer using our materials? And we always deliver on-spec product, but it doesn't always perform the same. So we're working on like a data capsule between what the customer sees and what that means, and then how did that actually happen in production, and trying to do like a commodities batch type of thing, but when we're looking at customer data. And within our digital R&D, we do product experiments where using the quantum computing or the quantum chemistry, we can more quickly identify what new materials might be possible, and actually save years on testing in the laboratory environment, and narrow down what that might look like in order to be able to test it in the lab and then build it out. And we're actually in close collaboration to try and bring all that together. So eventually the supply chain materials, the spec coming in, the production, and then the customer, and trying to make it continuous improvements at all times.
Okay, great. Andy, I think maybe you can take this next one. Our IT department is already working on this. How are you different?
How are we different? Well, I would say that what makes us different is we understand the systems that IT is responsible for, but we also understand the systems that OT is responsible for. And one of the things that we often find ourselves doing is working with IT to really understand what the business is trying to do, and the data that is essential that they're responsible for, how you need to bring that into the OT environment, bring it together in order to deliver these use cases. And so, for example, that value slide that I showed as the last slide, that is time series data from the plants and design data, engineering data, but it's also a lot of data that the IT department is responsible for. And we often find ourselves helping to be the translator for IT between OT and IT, to understand, with our experience, we've got a lot of OT folks on our team, but to help them speak a common language and understand the importance of being able to bring those data sources together in a secure but scaled way. I think the other thing is, for a lot of industrials, it's their first move to the cloud, and it's that shift in thinking from capacity to consumption, and they often sort of miss that, particularly when they're working with the cloud vendors, and suddenly they get, their bill was $5,000 last month, and now it's $50,000 based on consumption, and being able to tie the value of that consumption to what's happening in the business. And so we're often in discussions with IT folks about some of these, some of the realities that you have to face as you adopt some of these new models as well.
Great. We have 2 more questions. What role do the line of business leads and also the corporate CIO play in buying process for new technology like Element? Maybe Jane can take this one.
So what role does the play? So the way we're set up at Covestro is we have a centralized technology department. And so we test and make decisions globally. And so that's how it worked for us. Now, in different business companies, you might have a different business model where it's done per site. But we took the element, the software, and actually tried it out and explained it and had people around the world say, yeah, I understand that, I see that, and see the value that that could bring. And so I have my technical experts actually spend their time with it and come back and say, yes, it's worth, you know, the money, because this is what I get out of it. And in long term, you know, this will make my job easier, my life easier. And that's kind of how we look at it.
Okay, great, thank you. You might have touched on this, maybe if you have anything else to add. Our last question is, you've talked about solutions for sustainable digital transformation, but what has been your experience scaling at an enterprise level? And you've touched on this a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's what we're doing now, is scaling at the enterprise level. So we're at 1% rollout of ProDavis, and we've got a plan for the next 2 years to get to the other. I don't know, we have 100,000 assets, so we've done 1,000 or a little more than that now, and in the next 2 years we'll do all of it. And in parallel, we're also doing the engineering technology change and the migration to cloud and all kinds of this, and it all ties together. It is more difficult at an enterprise level to roll out, but I've got a core team. I think it's 11 or 12 people in the middle who are overseeing and coordinating all of that work to make sure that each site gets the value that's expected and gets the training and all that. And so it's not just, in the background they're doing a download. They're actually, we used to travel to the sites. We clearly don't do that now, but they'll spend, days, online helping them, training them, giving them the support they need. So there's really a very good dedicated team for that.
Great, that's it for our questions. Thank you so much, Jane and Andy, for the wonderful information. In terms of next steps, you can visit our website. We have a video that you can watch. You can also request a demo or just contact us. Please also engage with us on social media. You can follow our company page and also connect with us on Twitter. We'll be very excited to hear from you. And finally, you will receive a very brief survey after this session. Please participate so we can continue to develop this type of content. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Have a great day and happy holidays.
Thank you, Juanita. Jane, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.